Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
I beg your pardon. I swallowed wrong. I swallowed wrong.
That's what she said. That's what she said. That's what she said.
Has the planet gone mad? I seek justice. Denied. I shall not submit. I shall conquer. I shall rise. My name is Gomez Adams, and I have seen evil. I have seen horror. I have seen the unholy maggots which feast in the dark recesses of the human soul. I have seen all this, but until today, I had never seen you.
Because democracy basically means government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
Then strangled them, and finally dismembered their bodies.
Right.
Then and homelessness and all that. And now, the voice you've been waiting for.
There is a secret song at the center of the world, and its sound is like razors through flesh. I'm here to turn up the volume.
All week long, the talking heads and commentators and punditry class have been trying to explain what exactly went wrong in Virginia on Tuesday. This was a race that Terry McAuliffe seemed to have in the bag up until a few weeks ago. This was a race that Biden won handily last year by 16 points. And in the days leading up to the election and the days since, everybody seems to want to rally around the idea that this is a problem with white suburban women, that they were fooled by the racist dog whistle of critical race theory, something that supposedly doesn't even exist. And on the day of the election, I happened to catch this segment on The View where they had Michelle Tafoya, who really wasn't the best person to articulate a more conservative point of view. I mean, she's a sports commentator. It's not like she's a, political scientist. But they like to take these little roundtable discussions and pretend like it's a well-rounded discussion by adding in a conservative that either doesn't really know much about what they're talking about, knows a little but not enough to articulate well, or somebody who is a total neocon, like Meghan McCain. I mean, we're talking somebody whose father was like the biggest piece of shit neoconservative, and she's on there to try to make conservatives seem human, and we're not evil, we're just quaint and old-fashioned. And I'm not even a conservative, but I do love to see vigorous and lively debate. What I don't enjoy so much is controlled opposition coming out and falling on their sword. But so they had this segment on the Virginia race, and the election was that day, and they were trying to boil it all down to critical race theory and how it was crazy because that doesn't even exist. That's not even being taught in schools.
It is election day, and there are some state races that poll watchers think could forecast which way the country is headed politically, especially the Virginia race between Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin, who's going all in on the critical race theory thing. Take a look.
We're actually standing up and saying we have a fundamental right to be engaged in our kids' education. We have a fundamental right to, we do, because parents matter. We have a fundamental right to make decisions about our lives as opposed to having big government making them all for us.
You see what's happening in Georgia and Florida because they're talking about this critical race theory. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, it's never been taught in Virginia. And I really hate it because it's a racist dog whistle.
Well, the two of them are in a dead heat right now, but my question is, why is an issue like critical race theory being taught in schools? It's not, but people are out of their minds.
Is that really true? Is this just a completely made-up, fake fear-mongering issue?
Yes, but no. But yes.
And then Michelle Tafoya started to make a really good point, but then immediately backed off of it.
I'm going to push back a little bit here, and here's
Go ahead.
why.
That's why you're here.
Because my kids, I'm here to be the odd man hated on the set. No, my kids in school, there is a big focus on the color of your skin.
How old are your children?
My children are now 16 and 13. Okay,
In what way?
It's been going on since they were in lower school, all right? And it is that there are affinity groups on campus for, my son's first best friend was a little African-American boy. They were inseparable. Get to a certain age, they start having what's called an affinity group, which means you go for lunch and pizza with people who look like you. Suddenly, my son wasn't hanging out with him anymore. His next best friend was a little Korean boy. Years, inseparable. He started going to his affinity groups. Why are we even teaching that the color of the skin matters? Because to me, what matters is your character and your values.
Yes, but you know, you live in the United States. You know that color of skin has been mattering to people.
Can't we
for
change
years.
it that it doesn't?
We need white people to step up and do that.
There, now see, somebody who is more well-versed in political debate would have said, okay, so you're saying that critical race theory isn't being taught in schools, but these affinity groups, which is just a fancy new word for saying segregation, but that doesn't sound good, so we'll call them affinity groups. Now, if that's not critical race theory, then what the fuck do you call it? It's true that critical race theory is something that started in college campuses, but it's being filtered down into lower education. The fact that you're not calling it officially critical race theory doesn't mean that that's not what the fuck it is. So if you want to try to make things more equal and more open and more diverse in our communities and our culture, then how the fuck does segregating our kids by race accomplish that? And for all this discussion about how critical race theory is a boogeyman, they acted like that was the only issue at stake when it comes to education. What made McAuliffe start dropping in the polls like a rock was the comments he made about parents and education. They didn't even fucking mention that on The View. It was the fact that he literally said parents should have no decisions in what their kids are learning. They should have no say.
And I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decisions. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Kill Whitey! No.
Busted.
And the messed up thing about that is they weren't even talking about critical race theory. They were talking about the sexually explicit shit that's been going into schools that parents have a problem with. I mean, that's why parents have been getting pissed off with school board members at these meetings and getting, kicked out and arrested and shit because they were freaking out on the school board members for the sexualized content that's appearing in these kids' fucking libraries. I mean, we're talking about 6th graders having content in the books in their libraries that I can't even talk about on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or the polite circles of the internet without getting kicked the fuck off. Parents were literally getting stopped from reading out loud the content from the books in their kids' libraries because it was too graphic for adults. There wasn't even kids in the room, but adults wouldn't even hear this shit, but they wanted kids to have access to it. That's why parents were pissed off. And McAuliffe gets up there and says that parents should have no fucking say.
Something you mentioned in Tuesday's debate is you said you don't believe parents should be telling schools what to teach. What did you mean by that?
Well, first of all, parents should be telling schools that they want their teachers to be vaccinated.
Do you think parents should have a say in the curriculum?
You don't want parents coming in every different school jurisdiction.
You alluded to parents staying out of this. We just want to make sure that we're understanding you correctly. What is your stance on that as far as what school agendas have to say for the kids?
First of all, this is determined by the State Board of Education and local school boards. And that's where it should be.
Do you still stand by your position that parents should not tell the schools what they should teach?
You do not want 25 parents picking books.
But sure, this is all just about suburban white women not wanting their children to learn the truth about historical racism in this country. There's also still a lot of details shaking out around the shooting on the Rust set, and there was an interview on Good Morning America with the attorney for the armorer, and it was kind of interesting to watch.
The attorney for Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer, for the production. Mr. Bowles, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I want to start with the chain of command of the gun that was used in the fatal shooting. But when the crew broke for lunch, your client told investigators that the guns were locked away, but ammunition was left unsecured on a cart. When production resumed, who handled the gun and who ultimately gave it to Baldwin?
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for having me on. At that point at 11 a.m. that morning, the gun was loaded with dummy rounds. Those are inert rounds incapable of firing on the cart. When Hannah came back from lunch, approximately 10 minutes after that, 12 something, she then showed that firearm to Mr. Halls, the assistant director. She spun the cylinder, showed him each of the rounds in that firearm, and then she gave the firearm to Mr. Halls.
And by saying that she picked up the gun, she spun the cylinder, are you trying to say that she rechecked the gun before it was given to Alec Baldwin?
She did spin the cylinder. She showed Mr. Halls each of the rounds. There were 6 dummy rounds that she had loaded into that firearm that she believed had been dummy rounds.
I'm not sure this guy should really be doing interviews. I mean, it seems like he could be doing damage to his client's court case, because what he just said is stupid as fuck. You're saying that your client picked up a gun, checked all cylinders, checked all these bullets that were dummy bullets that she believed to be dummy bullets, and then handed it to the assistant director who handed it to Alec Baldwin. So either your contention is that he switched out one of these rounds for a live round, or she was too fucking stupid to be able to tell the difference between a dummy round and a live round. I mean, these do look very similar if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, but anybody who knows about guns could be able to tell the difference. But oh, well, she picked it up and she spun the cylinder and showed him each round individually. Oh, so you're saying that she's completely fucking incompetent then?
And does Hannah know how a live bullet got into that weapon?
No, and I appreciate you asking that. That's going to be the biggest question in this case, and that's something we're very on and we're looking at. We're going to work closely with law enforcement, do anything we can to cooperate. The FBI is running forensic testing, evidence, DNA and fingerprint. That's going to be critical in terms of who put that live round on the scene. Multiple live rounds, we understand, were recovered, and why. Because the other interesting fact about this, there was a box of labeled dummy rounds that Hannah had been pulling from. She knew were dummy rounds. Somebody put that live round or live rounds in that box. When you do that, you can only have bad intentions, because you're going to confuse the rounds if you're the armorer. And they appear very similarly. The dummy rounds look like a regular live round.
So you're saying that it could have been purposely done?
We are looking at that possibility. We're afraid that could have been what happened here.
Yeah, the dummy rounds look like a live round when you're seeing them on screen, but when you're actually looking at the round and you know anything about firearms, you can tell the fucking difference. And the only way you could have dummy rounds get into a box of live rounds is if you had bad intentions, or if you're a total fucking idiot. It's going to be interesting to see whose prints come off of those rounds to find out who put them in the fucking box. Can't wait for that one.
We're afraid that could have been what happened here, that somebody intended to sabotage this set with a live round intentionally placed in a box of dummies. Otherwise, you wouldn't, first of all, you wouldn't bring a live round on the set. But second of all, why do you place that in the box labeled dummies that the armorer is going to be pulling from? Everybody knows they're going to be getting them from there. Why would you do that other than to try to cause some incident on the set?
You could get those rounds mixed up if you yourself are a dummy. It seems like this attorney just saw this opportunity to do this interview as his little 15 minutes of fame and to get on TV, because he is not doing her any fucking favors with this shit. But I can't wait to see whose fingerprints they pull off of these live rounds, because if it turns out to be hers, it's gonna look really bad for her. At the end of last week, a couple of people from Project Veritas got their homes raided by the FBI, and even though James O'Keefe was asked not to discuss it because it could jeopardize the investigation, they didn't order him not to talk about it, and he did. And then the next day, his house get raided. And this is all stemming apparently from the Ashley Biden diary that supposedly details a lot of sordid shit going on in that family. And this was brought to Project Veritas last year, and they vetted it but couldn't fully, prove that it was legit, so they never actually put it out. And then the National File did publish a bunch of it, and for some reason now all of a sudden the FBI is investigating somebody's lost diary. Another case of, for all the fucking things the FBI could be doing, they're investigating somebody's lost diary. But this is still a developing case, and we'll just have to kind of see how that plays out. This seems more like an excuse to just go after Project Veritas for something more than anything else. I hope you're all getting ready for that dark winter that we got told about last year. Joe Biden mentioned how we were facing a very dark winter, but it didn't really get that bad last winter. This winter might be a lot worse with, supply chain shortages, and there could be a problem with the food supply too. I mean, China just went and told their citizens they need to stockpile food for this coming winter, which is not something that they normally do in any way, shape, fashion, or form. And while over here we're being told not to worry, everything's going to be fine, it's all going to get sorted out. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Sláinte.
All I have in this world is my thoughts and my words, and I don't break them for no one. You understand? So say good night to the bad guy. 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 Come on. Come on. with me. I told you. Don't fuck with me. I told you. Don't fuck with me. You stupid fuck. Look at you now. Look at you now.